Davenport here with the Jungle Apocalypse podcast, and this is episode number 102. And as always, Mike Sherwin's here with me. How's it going, Mike?
Pretty good. How are you today, Rob?
Well, another wild week of news, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's been an interesting one.
Well, let's get started then. It's story number 10.
Okay. The first story we're bringing you tonight is Enterovirus D68 hospitalizes hundreds of children across 10 U.S. states. Enterovirus is related to rhinovirus, which is a common cold. And in Kansas City, Missouri, they've treated 300 cases, and 15% of which have ended up in intensive care. Though the Department of Health has stated that most cases will be mild. What really gets me on this one is at the same time across the ocean there in Africa, we're having an increase in Ebola, which is starting to get a little bit more out of hand.
Yeah, it's funny how they always come up with these ones that, these panic situation ones where it's, swine flu or it's bird flu or it's this flu or that flu. And none of them have ever, taken hold. And now we have one that's actually ravaging things. And, well, don't worry about that. Let's talk about this new flu that's killing kids.
Yeah. But this one, just comes from out of nowhere. They don't even know where the source of it came from. It just started affecting children.
See, that stuff, does happen in nature, right? Like viruses mutate. It's a particularly strong case of the flu or cold
exactly.
or whatever.
And who knows what other viruses we could have come up with, like the climate change and stuff that's coming along too. Like I've read before that in the Arctic there, where the peat moss is melting, that they've discovered 15,000-year-old viruses that are starting to wake up. Yeah,
I've read stuff about that. That sounds, and it's a scary consequence of global warming or global climate change or whatever. Like that these things may pop up that haven't been around since prehistoric ice age times. And, we're out there digging all these bones up and stuff, and methane holes blowing out of the peat moss, and it's a pretty crazy situation.
Yeah, and it's like just not here in North America, but you're finding that's happening in like all over the Arctic, the whole Arctic region, and even in the southern Antarctic region too. There's a whole bunch of things that are going on, and it's starting to affect everything globally. Like it's kind of almost scary how all these like little things kind of tie in together.
Well, yeah, like it really puts us at the edge of destruction, as they say. But all right, well, let's get on to the next story. Queen is urged to intervene as Scotland appears on the brink of voting for independence. David Cameron is under growing pressure to ask the Queen to speak out in support of the Union, as another opinion poll confirms a surge in support for Scottish independence. So, like the thing is, when you're Canadian or when you're Australian or any of the other Commonwealth nations, you're under the Queen. And she still has total control over what goes on. Now, maybe she doesn't interfere in day-to-day operations, but you can be sure that if something goes on that she doesn't like, she'll be more than happy to veto it.
Oh, yeah. It's happened before in Canada.
Yeah, exactly. Like like when the Harper wanted to prorogue Parliament, and I can't even remember what he was doing when he did that, but he had to go to the Governor General, who could have said no if the Queen told the Governor General to say no, and nothing could have been done. And, the Prime Minister is supposed to be the most powerful man in Canada. Like that.
No,
he might be the most powerful man in Canada, but he ain't the most powerful man over the nation's affairs.
Yeah. That's you could say it that way, but there's the Governor General is actually technically the most powerful person in Canada, because without their signature on the laws, that law does not become law.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's all kinds of shit that could happen if we wanted to do something very radical that the establishment wasn't really happy with.
Well, exactly. And with the whole thing with Scotland wanting to vote for their independence here, we could also bring up the specter of Quebec independence in Canada as well.
Well, you can be damn sure that if Scotland pulls it off, Quebec's going to be back up on a referendum pretty soon.
Oh, yeah. Well, they've been trying to get another referendum to go through for the last 15 years, but they've just been unsuccessful because well, the Liberals and the last time the Conservatives actually managed to push the Quebecois out of their strong stranglehold on Quebec.
Well, yeah, and I think that was just a sign of Quebec being sick and tired of the bloc not being able to actually do anything, only just talking a good game and being a thorn in the side of the establishment.
Yeah, exactly.
Beyond that, they never had much power. I mean, they just happened to control in ways they controlled the balance of power. Like, remember when they were the official opposition? Like, what the fuck was that about? Here in Canada, one party from one province was the official opposition against the current government. It
goes to show you how unbalanced our political spectrum in Canada actually is. It really is only two provinces that do decide through the elections who is running the government. It has absolutely nothing to do with us Western provinces, and has absolutely nothing to do with the Atlantic provinces.
Yeah, exactly.
Or our Northern Territories either. Like those votes don't really count.
No. We're just, when it comes to voting and keeping people in power, we're just a side note on the nightly newscast about it. So.
Yeah, same with us Flatlanders here in Saskatchewan.
Well, what do you think? Do you think the Scottish are going to actually do it?
Well, they've been gunning for independence from England since at least the 1300s. So I have a feeling that the polls are correct and that the Scots are going to vote for independence. It seems to be a trend this year for nations within a nation to be voting for independence. Happened in the Ukraine.
Yeah, that's right too. Well, just as a side note, since this story was published, the Queen has come out and said she is not going to interfere. So we'll see what that means. I think that's maybe just a political ploy to, some people that are on the fence don't feel bullied into voting yes, because, the Queen doesn't care. Well, what's the point, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But
I also noticed though through right at the beginning there's you can start to see the financial terrorism happening against Scotland.
Oh yeah. Well, that's the thing. If they leave the Union, they're just going to destroy them financially. Yeah. You can't fuck with London.
Yeah, Cameron said you lose the pound. So, then they'd probably just accept the euro if the EU says, yeah, you can join the European Union, which I think Scotland is part of, aren't they?
I don't know how that would work out. I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to actually ask somebody that was studied up on it, because that's a big question. Yeah, I don't know, but my gut is the way that they're playing it off. The public opinion's probably going to shift the other way just before the vote, and it will be a no.
Or
that could be wrong.
Going to be something that's happened similarly in Quebec there, where all of a sudden the pro-yes vote managed to get a whole bunch of last-minute votes in and barely defeated the bill.
Exactly. Like you don't lose an election if you don't want to.
Exactly.
not an election, like a question like that. It's one of the national referendums or whatever, that's a big thing. So you can usually sway it if you're empowering, you have the financial means. So, anyway, let's get on to the next story.
Okay. Well, the next story here is, the textbook theory behind volcanoes may be wrong. The scientists involved in the research in this study here have said that the way that they figured magma came out of volcanoes through narrow plumes from the magma is kind of wrong now. They haven't been able, for the last 20 years of research, nobody's been able to find these narrow jets of magma or basically not be able to find them through the seismic data. But the thing is it's still kind of on the fence on that one too, because the thin plumes could be too thin to be detected by the seismic devices that we have around the world. Mm-hmm. But the leading scientist, Professor Don Anderson, or not professor, but Don Anderson, he says that instead of just these thin plumes that work their way up through the magma core, it's a large chunk of slow-moving, hot magma that kind of bubbles up from near the Earth's core and slowly pushes its way through to the Earth's surface and through the volcanoes. Well, they're thinking now, because of this, part of the hypothesis is they might actually be able to start to more accurately predict volcanoes and earthquakes.
Yeah, that would make sense.
they were working on the thin plume theory, and it's like the science doesn't really correlate, or the scientific data doesn't really correlate to that, because they like I said earlier, they can't really prove the existence of these small plumes or thin plumes.
Huh. Okay. Well, yeah, I don't know much about volcanoes anyway. But
Yeah, me neither. And it's just like, maybe if we can change the way that we understand how they work, which it seems like this guy's trying to do, like I said, we might be able to start predicting how these things are affecting our planet, and be able to better judge when disasters could happen, which would be nice.
yeah, well, that would be a big thing, right? Like, I mean, volcanoes contribute so much to apocalyptic scenarios throughout history,
exactly.
That it would be good to know more. The more we can know about them, the better. And I always find there's always that problem with science is that once they get concerned or got what they think is the answer in place, changing their mind is so hard.
Oh, exactly.
Even in the face of, like, it still makes sense to what they come up with as far as the evidence goes. It's just maybe their conclusion was wrong. And yeah. I don't know. That's a thing that's always bothersome with me about science. But
well, that's the thing. Like, a lot of people forget too that science is just theory, yet they cling to it as like actual truth. Like, the whole complete package, everything's been figured out, and what the scientists are saying is 100% factual and true. But in essence, it could be partially factual, but most of what we know as science is theory. So and theory is meant to change and morph and expand and evolve.
Yeah, well, I've noticed that with the rise of the famous scientist, Ken Nye the Science Guy, and Neil deGrasse Tyson and Richard Dawkins and all these guys that have come forward. And you know what? Look, I'm not saying that what they're saying is wrong. Science is important. But I also noticed that there's a hint of arrogance sometimes when you're talking to them about things that are still theories that we do not have an answer for. And they're going, well, based on this and this and this is what's going to happen. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's still a prediction. I mean, it's an educated, or at least an educated guess. Like you can't say until you can replicate it. Who's to say that is the case? Exactly.
And that's the basis of science, right? Is you get the experiment that somebody's done. You take that experiment, you follow their steps, and you should be able to replicate their experiment.
Exactly.
And then that's kind of how they prove theories, but there's still kind of a theory. It's like religion. People put too much blind faith into something somebody said.
Yeah, that's exactly it. All right, let's get on to the next story. Malaysian jet over the Ukraine was downed by high energy objects, Dutch investigators say. 8 weeks after the Malaysian Airlines plane was disintegrated over eastern Ukraine, killing all 298 people aboard and triggering a frenzy of east-west finger-pointing, investigators, in their first account of the calamity on Tuesday, released evidence consistent with an attack from a surface-to-air missile, but shed no clear light on who was responsible. And I noticed that what's really interesting about this article and a lot of them that are coming out is nobody's claiming which side did it. It's almost like we're almost suspicious the Ukraine were the ones that did it, or maybe the government actually knows, or the military knows it was the Ukraine that did it, and it's being hush hush.
And that's what kind of surprised me too, that it was the Dutch safety board instead of the U.S. safety board that went in and did the investigation, because usually in those situations it's the American guys that go in there and start doing all the work and looking into what happened, the causes and stuff.
Well, yeah, but see, the way they worked this one out, it was because it's number one, it's a Malaysian airline. It's not a North American airline. And B, it happened on European soil. And what was it? Like 90% of the people on the plane were Dutch citizens. So,
okay, that makes sense then.
Yeah, that was the major reason why the Dutch and the Malaysians worked together. And they brought in a few other people to help look at things. But who knows who actually was responsible for this?
The list on that one is incredibly long. It could have been any number or group of people responsible for that one.
Well, it could have been as simple as, they were having a guy set in there doing training simulations or whatever, and maybe they trained him wrong and he accidentally fired off a missile and shot a plane out of the sky. We don't know.
Exactly.
It could have been, the Russians doing it. It could have been the Ukrainians doing it. It could have been some other foreign government that just wants to light up the world doing it. So
no, exactly. It could have been a NATO forces guy that did it. Or here's one that's coming way up from left field, ISIS.
ISIS shoots it down to start a war. You know what? I wouldn't be surprised.
Hey, and stranger things have happened, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right, folks, let's get on to the next story.
Oh, yeah. This one. This is a kind of a scary article. Climate change will disrupt half the North America's bird species, a study says. The Baltimore Oriole will probably no longer live in Maryland. The common loon might leave Minnesota, and the trumpeter swan could be entirely gone. These are some of the grim prospects outlined in a report released by the National Audubon Society, which found that climate change is likely to so alter the bird population of North America that about half the approximate 650 species will be driven to smaller spaces or forced to find new places to live, feed, and breed over the next 65 years. If they do not, for several dozen, it will be very difficult, and they could become extinct.
Oh, yeah.
For me, this article kind of hits a little bit close to home for me. When I was about 9 or 10 years old, we were living out on an acreage about 45 minutes outside of Saskatoon, and I just watched an episode of Lauren Green's New Wilderness, which featured the peregrine falcon. The next day, I went outside, and because I was living in the middle of nowhere and nothing else to do in the middle of summer, so I was watching birds. And I noticed that one of the nests kind of had a bird that looked similar to the one I was watching on Lauren Green's New Wilderness the night before, and it was a peregrine falcon. At the time, there was only 2 known mated pairs in existence, and they figured there might have been like 2 or 3 unknown pairs that they weren't sure of. And I managed to have discovered one that was living on an abandoned building in her yard.
Wild.
Yeah, it totally blew my mind. I forced my mom to phone the university here in Saskatoon. We got what are those guys called? Bird specialists, oncologists, or something like that. The bird guys. He came out. Watched the birds with me for a bit, and I'm like, yeah, that one way up there. And sure enough, peregrine falcon.
Wild, eh?
Yeah. And yeah, now that area there for a 100-mile radius was declared a no hunting zone. I kind of pissed off a bunch of farmers then.
It always pisses somebody off, though. It doesn't matter what you do. You've always got some group that's going to be angry about it.
But because of that, it helped a species of bird that was almost wiped completely out. It helped get this bird back to almost sustainable population. And now, because of climate change, we're looking at losing these species again, and that's not a good thing.
Yeah, no, we've got so many things. What is it? 200-300 species a day going extinct, and that number is rising quickly.
And who's to say that we might not be on that list?
Well, we're going to be on that list if our numbers keep dropping on stuff. But all right, folks. One thing we've wanted to start doing on each show is we're going to feature one of our friends who do music and make videos. So this week we have our good friend Ian Baird, who is now working with on a new project called Shockbox. And this is Osmosis. So hang on. We'll be right back. Finding the God particle could destroy the universe, warns Stephen Hawking. The elusive God particle discovered by scientists in 2012 has the potential to destroy the universe, Professor Stephen Hawking has warned. At the very high energy levels, the Higgs boson could cause space and time to suddenly collapse, and we wouldn't see it coming, the former Cambridge professor of mathematics says. So here we have the world famous Stephen Hawking talking about, like this hadron collider idea. Maybe we should be slowing this stuff down. Now it goes on in the article to talk about how he's talking about projects that don't exist yet. Like, we need to build a lot of different particle accelerators and discover a few more things before we can do it. But the possibility is there. And I think when Stephen Hawking generally comes out and says this kind of thing, it's more about getting people to think about it now so that when it does come up, it's not as concerning because we've studied it. It was like when people were all freaked out about the Hadron Collider going on, that it was going to, create dark matter and all these other things. Like the chances of that stuff happening were ranked so low, it was astronomically. And then you had these fear salesmen coming out and just exploiting the fear of the unknown of what they were doing and taking it. And these little things that, like whatever the dark matter was, how it would all collapse together and bind to the gravity and like collapse the earth into this tiny mass, only a meter by a meter or something. And that might have happened, but the chances of it happening were so slim. There was no like it's like walking outside and getting hit with an asteroid type of odds. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's just like when they set off the atomic bomb for the first time, they weren't sure if they were going to blow the atmosphere off the planet. Did that stop them then? No. And when they started up the synchrotron here at the University of Saskatchewan, one of the first experiments they were doing was separating layers of quarks.
Oh, yeah.
They weren't sure if they were going to blow Saskatoon into a fucking... they weren't sure if they were going to blow Saskatoon into a 5 mile by 5 mile pit.
Yeah, see, there you go. I mean, this is the thing with science. I mean, sometimes depending on how you're viewing the evidence, it might look like something like that could happen. But when it's actually said and done, you realize that, oh, well, that didn't happen for this, and this reason. And we have a choice. We can either pursue science like how we're doing now, or we can shut everything off and just hope to God that the nuclear fuel on the planet doesn't kill us all off, and we're good to go. But I don't think people are going to want to make that choice.
No, I don't think so. The gains from the research outweigh the possible side effects of this research.
Well, speaking of research, we should get on to our next story.
Scientists have discovered bacteria that eat radioactive waste in the UK. Bacteria that eat radioactive waste has been discovered in Britain and could now be used to help eat away at nuclear waste. It has been reported. Scientists at the University of Manchester have found extremophile bacteria, which can survive the harsh conditions of underground radioactive waste disposal sites. It's crazy how Mother Nature seems to come up with ways to fix our mistakes.
Well, that's the thing the way I look at it is like nothing we can do can stop nature and the universe from continuing on. Things might change, the circumstances might change. Like, yeah, we might kill off all organic life on the planet, but the planet will still continue on and the universe is going to still continue on, and nothing's going to change there. So why are we so worried about that stuff?
Yeah. Well, and from discoveries like this, the chances of us wiping out all organic life on the planet seem to be getting a little bit lower than they were before.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you got to remember how much stuff we didn't know 100 years ago. Like everything seemed like a reality at that point because we were just discovering what we could actually do. What is matter? How does it work? How does gravity work? Like how does time work? These are things that, especially in the last 100 years, we've really developed a deeper understanding of what it is. All right, let's get on to the next story. And this was a good one. I don't know if you had a chance to watch this, Mike. It's an 8-minute film, Escaping Death in Northern Iraq.
No, but I've been seeing this one go through my Facebook news feed like constantly. It's one I'm going to have to sit down and eventually watch here.
You want to talk about a a world event that would make a good movie? It's this story. Now, the guy, Ali Hussein Kadim, was an Iraqi soldier who signed up for the military 21 days before ISIS came knocking to his town. To his military base, I should say. They all dressed in civilian clothes. They tried to escape the base, and then these ISIS fighters showed up, and they pretended that they were there to rescue them. So they loaded them all on the buses and separated them, and then the next thing you know, they're being marched down the highway. And it shows in the video of them marching these Iraqi soldiers down the highway, and there has to be, I don't know how many thousands of them, because you realize it's the desert, right? So everything's kind of in a straight line and sand everywhere. He pans from one end of the highway all the way to the other end of the highway as far as the eye can see, and all you see is these little soldiers walking. Anyway, they take them all out. There was apparently 2 separate places where they did this. They either took them to the water, and they basically made them bend over the water, shot them in the head, and dropped them in the water. And then the other spot, they got them all on their hands and knees, blindfolded, and they walked up behind them and started shooting them in the head. This poor Kadim guy, he gets taken out there, put on his hands and knees, and he was like 4th in line. And so they shot the first guy, they shot the second guy, they shot the third guy. They shoot him, he falls, but nothing happened. He says he can't figure out what happened to the bullet that was supposed to be for him. So he falls, and realizing what had happened, he just laid there and he didn't move. And he ended up having to lay there until it got dark. And after he was sure all the other soldiers were gone, he got up and he started running. Now, it goes through and it shows the route that he took and how he managed to do it. But my God, he had to swim across the river with his hands tied in order to get out. So he ended up having to stay on the bank of the river for 3 days avoiding ISIS, only like a few miles from where he escaped. And then finally he gets across, he meets this old guy who cuts the ropes for him, swims across to this island, and then swims across to the other side and is smuggled out of town by the other Iraqi citizens, and he finally got home. But out of that massacre of, I can't remember how many people were killed, 1,500 or something, he was the only known survivor.
Crazy. That's where they were up in the Kurdish territory, rounding up like whole villages, pretty much killing the men and selling off the women, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same exact type of thing.
That is it's amazing how us humans can treat each other at times. Just ridiculous.
Yeah, it's sad. And when you see stuff like this, like, for once in my life, I want to see our government get involved in fighting ISIS. I really don't think this is some CIA creation to scare us all in line or anything. I think this is a true threat. It's a cult that has gained military weapons in the Middle East that's killing people off, and that's exactly what it is.
And they're recruiting young, aggressive males, and somehow they've managed to also recruit the young women. So, like,
well, hey man, remember the Heaven's Gate cult?
Mm-hmm.
Come hang out with this old guy that's crazy as fuck. Yeah. And then talk about an alien spaceship that's coming behind a comet and how you're all going to drink this magical Kool-Aid that's going to put you there. And everybody commits suicide. Like, people are fucking dumb sometimes.
Well, it goes to show you how much people, or how far people are willing to go to become accepted in the group.
Yeah, exactly. But, well, hopefully something gets done here and we put a stop to those guys. But let's get on to story number 2.
Okay, story number 2 here is Meteorite smashes into Nicaraguan Capital. Okay, this is kind of interesting because on September 7th here, Amazingly, nobody in the 1.2 million person city was injured in the incident. And yeah, even though it impacted near the airport, nothing really happened. What surprises me about this one is that same day, within 25,000 miles of the Earth, was another asteroid that narrowly missed us.
And wasn't there, like, just about 24 hours later, another big meteor go across the sky? I can't remember if it was on the East Coast or was it overseas? Or...
Yeah, one that just about 24 hours after this one in Nicaragua hit.
That's wild.
Yeah, crazy stuff. But hey, we're in the active area of space at the moment. So.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's just it. This could be a lot worse if we're unlucky. So let's keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah.
On to the final story. Ebola surging beyond control. WHO's Margaret Chan warns. And this article is kind of interesting, and I'm just going to find the section. This is the two paragraphs that really made this article for me. Ebola spreads through direct contact with bodily fluids, but Ulsterholm, who is Michael Ulsterholm of the Center for Infectious Disease Control and Research and Policy at University of Minnesota, raised the possibility that he said virologists are loath to discuss openly, but must consider behind closed doors. The prospect that Ebola virus could mutate and become transmissible through air. Ulsterholm cites a story in 2012, or cites a 2012 study by researchers at the National Microbiology Laboratory in Winnipeg that showed that Ebola Zaire strain behind the West Africa's current outbreak could spread through respiratory route between pigs and monkeys. So here we go. This is what I was talking about. I knew more about it than I was letting on the air, but I couldn't remember where the source had come from, and I had a hell of a time finding it. And then this article popped up, and I was like, "Holy shit! This is why this is the top story of the week." This is a really bad sign, Mike.
Yeah, well, very bad sign. I think I remember seeing this study pop up briefly there in 2012. Well, being in Canada, we get to see this stuff from our local laboratories, and it looks like that one was done in the microbiology lab in Winnipeg. Another scary thing, one of the scariest universities in North America has to be the University of Saskatchewan. We have a class 4 research facility for viruses here as well. And that's just the tip of the iceberg about the stuff that goes on here. This is not a good thing at all.
Well, do you remember the scientist? I think it was just shortly after that report in 2012 came out that was trying to smuggle the Ebola virus out of Canada.
Yeah, because he wanted it out of Canada so that we didn't have any issues with it. Come on. I've never heard a fucking more made up story by the media in all my life. Like, that. Why would he only smuggle that little bit out when you know damn well it's in other biology labs around the country somewhere? Oh, I can almost guarantee that they have a strain of Ebola here at the local university in Saskatoon.
Yeah, I'm sure of it.
I would have passed them.
Well, no, and you got to remember this stuff is stored all around North America. There's a ton of these. Well, not a ton, but there's quite a few of these level 4 labs where they hold these viruses. And I mean, believe me, Ebola is the minor one out of the pile.
Oh yeah, that's like the least distressing one. There's there's forms of Ebola that they have out there that are like 10 times worse than the strain that's going around right now. And the scary thing too about the university here in Saskatoon is it's one of the leading genetic research labs in the world. Like, they get an insane amount of money brought in through genetic research companies, and they've made major discoveries in a lot of branches of genetic science.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, so it's and the thing is too is I didn't find out about the disease research facility here until this 2012 study came out, and it had been operating in Saskatoon under the radar since 2004.
See, that's the thing. And if you don't know these places are there, like the one in Winnipeg has only became known really since about 2011, 2012, when various stories were starting to be reported out of their discoveries. Mm-hmm. People don't even realize what a level 4 containment facility is. Like they think it's, well, that sounds pretty interesting, but what does that actually mean? And it's something you should go look up. Like these are high-end containment facilities that are authorized to handle the most dangerous viruses known to mankind. And God only knows what they've managed to make in there.
Yeah, and one that comes to mind is the Atlanta Center for Disease Control Research Facility. It's probably the first Class 4 facility out there.
Did you see they're also remaking Stephen King's The Stand?
Yeah.
Convenient timing.
But didn't he kind of blame the whole death thing on a virus very similar to Ebola?
Yeah, it was similar. I think it was more of a cholera or something that they. Yeah, I can't remember for the life of me. It's been so long since I read the book. I have watched the movies, but I don't think the movie ever lays out exactly what it is like the books did. But it's pretty scary times with the whole Ebola thing, and it's something I'm definitely going to be keeping my eyes on for the next few weeks and seeing where this goes, because they're calling by the end of the month for this outbreak to top 20,000 people, and right now it's at about 3,000.
And the scary thing is the strain is starting to enter into North America, even though we're probably able to contain what comes here. Who knows what might happen if certain protocols aren't followed or they fail.
Yeah, exactly. It could be a pretty interesting scenario. But I don't know. I'm going to keep my fingers crossed, Mike.
Yeah, same here. I'm thinking positive on this one, that it's just more fear mongering, and that's all it is.
Well, let's hope so, because anyway. All right, folks, that's another episode of the Jungle Apocalypse. And don't forget to swing by the Facebook group, facebook.com/Jungle Apocalypse, and start voting on the stories by liking or sharing them. And the stories with the most amount of hits and starting next week will be the top 10 stories. So go over and do that, facebook.com/Jungle Apocalypse. And just one more note, go over to bravenewmedia.tv and sign up for the mailing list so you know when we're launching. It's actually October 6th we're going to launch officially. That's when the Roku channel should be out, and Chromecast and all kinds of great stuff's going to be done for that. So keep in touch and check that out at bravenewmedia.tv. And like I said, like and share the stories on Facebook, facebook.com/Jungle Apocalypse. I'm Rob Davenport.
And I'm Mike Sherwin.
See you next week.